veux arriver après, on verra. Si tu veux bien. Et on doit utiliser le micro. Comme c'est mis sur YouTube, on le dit. Sinon, les autres ne vont rien. Si jamais il y a quelqu'un, ils ne vont rien entendre. D'accord. Okay. Then. Good evening, everybody. I welcome everybody for this evening. Thank you very much for coming, even though it's finally very nice outside. But you will not regret it, because it's my pleasure and my honor to welcome Umar Timol tonight in Bayreuth. Please give him a warm welcome. There have been there has already been some information online for sure on about Umar Timol. We met several times, and we also my students have to read the books, but they always discover something nice. But I will hand over directly to him then, because he will introduce himself, his work. You will have some reading, and then also go switch over to the photography. And I think this is particularly interesting as well, because it's also about verbal and visual art and how this is linked, and what the nice title, How to Capture the Soul. We have been discussing this for a while. I think this will also give us some food for discussion then in the end, after the reading and the presentation by Umar Timol. So thank you for coming, and please stay to the end so that we can have some discussions in the end. Umar, I'm very happy that you made it from Mauritius to come to Bayreuth, and in the meantime the sun is also here, so I hope you like it. So thank you very much.
So, hello everyone. So first of all, I would like to thank Professor Fendler as well as Bayreuth University Cluster of Excellence for inviting me. It's an honor and a joy to be here today. So I had briefly met Ute over 11 years ago in Mauritius during a conference, and then a year again in San Francisco. And I certainly didn't expect then to find myself one day in Bayreuth in such wonderful company. Life is full of miracles, and thank you for this miracle, Ute. So I will talk to you a bit about my journey as an author and photographer, and talk about, among other things, what drove me to write, the meaning in my eyes of creation, how poetry led me to photography, and photography to poetry. I think there is buried deep within me a rupture, which is the death of my father when I was 3 years old. I don't remember much, and since I had a happy childhood, perhaps this memory isn't necessary. But when I think back, I realize that this absence, this emptiness, this hole has shaped who I am, has made me the man I am. Perhaps creative impulse emanates from mourning. Perhaps death is at the heart of creation. I'm fascinated by art, music, cinema, theater, everything beautiful. But I have a different relationship with words, which represent for me the pinnacle of desire and beauty. So what is this spell that allows certain beings to write such beautiful texts? How to explain the magic of text? Of course, it involves talent and hard work, but it's also, I think, surhumain, superhuman. It's achieving transcendence, or at least a form of transcendence. So it took me some time to understand that writers are just like other beings, but they are not more or less human. Actually, meeting writers have often been a massive disappointment, but this does not prevent me from admiring their work. So how in such circumstances to write? I think the trigger was caused by Baudelaire, the famous French poet, which I read when I was 19. It is true that I read Baudelaire differently now, but I was shocked reading him. I felt like I recognized myself, heard my own voice, and echo of my life. I understood then that writing is not only about admiration, about desire, but that it is possible, that what is within me can turn into a text, that it can become alive. So I entered this world of writing on tiptoe, like a child almost, discovering a wonderful world. I started writing timidly, text published initially in the Mauritian, well, I'm from Mauritius, right, in the Mauritian press. Well, I was surprised to discover my first poem published in the pages of the Mauritian newspaper L'Express. That was about 25 years ago. And since then, I haven't stopped. I've published collections of poetry, novels, a collection of aphorism, comic book scripts, articles in the press, and more recently, theater. Writing has been and is a real happiness, thus transcribing what one is on the page, sometimes achieving beauty, sharing one's text with others, participating in poetry festivals all over the world, a certain recognition, but obviously flatters my vanity and my narcissism. Writing, I feel, is like a bridge between oneself and others, between oneself and the world, and ultimately a way of being in the world. To give you an overview of my work, I will now read two excerpts from my text. The first one being an excerpt from my poem Blood, translated into English by Suzanne Weeks. Well, the text is available on the website of the International Poetry Festival of Rotterdam. Well, I must say I'm no longer capable of writing this type of poems today. I wrote it about like 15 years ago. I no longer find the exuberance within me anymore. So you should see it on the screen here. Just give me a minute. Just 1 minute. Right. So you should see the... Tu peux m'aider, s'il te plaît. Voilà, c'est ça. Non, c'est 100, c'est l'autre. Le deuxième, ouais.
Le deuxième.
Ouais.
Ah, ici, alors.
Voilà, c'est là.
Donc il faudrait continuer ici.
Ouais, je vais appuyer ici, non, c'est ça?
Non, ici.
Ok, d'accord. Donc, I'm going to read this poem. Well, you'll see the English translation on the... So it's an extract of a fairly long poem. I can't read the whole poem, obviously. I'm going to read about like 1/3 of the poem. So it's a love poem, basically. Tu es belle et je suis fou. Corps de pierre, corps solaire, corps solitaire. L'actessence estivale et chancreur sauvage. Tu es ma chair d'ivoire, astre noir, mon obscène territoire. Tu m'emmures sous le dôme des lamentations, ma succulence permise, ma maîtresse, ma connivence sensuelle, ma lunaire tyrannique, princesse endiablée, lassie de sueur, idole enrobée de soie et d'épines. Donc, œuvre de feu et de sang, les aréoles de tes lèvres épousent et entaillent ma peau. Assèche-moi, je suis désert. Flagelle-moi, je suis esclave. Inféo de moi, je suis ta propriété, ton bibelot. Je plisse ta nuque, j'éploie ton ventre, dune céleste. Ta chevelure est une liasse de flammes, tes yeux un ouragan de sable. J'évente ta langue engorgée et me désaltère. Elle est hostie pour ma bouche infidèle, elle est calice pour ma bouche hérétique. Je renonce au devoir, à la raison. Je suis dévot au lieu de la débauche. Je suis mendiant au seuil de ta taverne. Je m'abreuve aux sources hallucinées. Opium et vin, je renifle tes arômes opiacés. Je mords tes ébréchus alcoolisés. Je suis celui revêtu de guenilles qui lave et baisse tes pieds. Je veux boire, encore boire, et me dissoudre sous les osmoses de l'ivresse. Je suis amant de l'amour, celui revêtu de laine, celui revêtu de crasse et de boue, celui qui se prosterne sur ton corps, lieu de vénération, lieu de prière. Celui qui, à l'aurore de ton voile, récite les silences de tes yeux. Celui qui glane des nappes de sang sur ton mausolée. Et tu es mon livre sanctifié, mon poème. Et je suis poète fou qui quémande le sens de ton verbe. Et je suis poète fou qui vole la parole. Poète fou qui dérobe ses obéissances. poète fou qui professe une parole transmuée, parole incantatoire, pour te célébrer et te créer. Parole au-delà de la parole pour t'aimer. Et tu es ma féconde indélicate, celle qui me purge de mes lassitudes, celle qui reflue mes fautes et mes rancœurs, celle qui coalise extase et douleur. Et ton nectar infeste mes rêves les plus nonchalants, ton nectar infeste mes repentirs nocturnes. Tu es festin que je romps et qui me corrompt. So here's an extract from the poem. It's a much longer poem. Well, you can read it online if you want. Ça ne suivait pas. I'm sorry, I'm really sorry about this. Well, those who don't, yeah.
Non, maintenant tu vas lire l'autre, c'est ça?
Ouais.
On revient en arrière. Ja, ja.
Really sorry. Well, you can read it online if you want. You'll find it. It's called Blood, yeah.
Moi, j'avance.
Si tu veux, ouais, okay. I'll just share an anecdote about the poem that I read. Well, it's a love poem. So I read this poem at the International Poetry Festival in Medellin in Colombia, which is a really famous festival. So you read poems in front of 100 of people, right? And I met some Colombian lady there who told me that your wife must be so lucky because this is a romantic poem. So I called my wife and I told her, you know, you're the luckiest wife on earth. And unfortunately, she wasn't too convinced. She said, they don't live with you on a daily basis, that's why. So she wasn't convinced that my great husband, unfortunately. Okay, now I'm going to read an excerpt from my novel, Le Journal d'une vieille folle. This was published about 10 years ago at Édition l'Harmattan. So it was translated, part of it was translated to English by Alexandra Weber-Isaac, who's the Mauritian translator and writer. In brief, it's a diary of a Mauritian woman who lives in Paris. She talks about her unhappiness and her romantic misfortunes. And so the novel has been adapted for the theater by the Mauritian director Gaston Valeyden. It was performed, I think 4 years ago. So it's a monologue, actually, of this woman who tells about her life and so on. And so I'm going to read it. So you might see there's a slight discrepancy between the text in front of the translation, because the person who translated was for theater. She didn't translate every single sentence, but I think you will get the idea here. So this is le journal of this lady. On commence, Ute? C'est là, c'est bon. Okay, donc je vais lire I'm going to read an extract from the novel. So it's the lady, the so-called vieille folle who's writing, it's her diary. Je suis un cliché. D'abord cliché exotique, car après bien 30 ans passés à Paris, on me sait encore avec la régularité d'un métronome les mêmes questions et les mêmes commentaires. Vous venez donc de là-bas, que ça doit être beau et splendide. Pourquoi habiter ici alors que votre île est si belle? Moi, je rêve d'y aller, me reposer sous le beau soleil des tropiques. Permettez-moi, madame, de vous dire que vous avez le charme et la douceur des gens de là-bas. Oui, c'est ça. Gentille et charmante, c'est ce qu'on retient de moi. Je suis l'étrangère, celle qui vient d'ailleurs, alors que je suis comme vous, bien plus que vous ne le croyez, que je suis empli de cette même merde qui grouille dans les bas-fonds de vos rêves avortés. Ensuite, cliché misérabiliste qui s'exerce généralement après quelques verres d'alcool, quand on est rouge et penaud et qu'on ne sait plus tout à fait ce qu'on dit, ou plutôt si.
quand on se laisse aller à dire ce qu'on pense vraiment, que oui, là-bas, c'est les cocotiers, et qu'est-ce qu'ils sont heureux, les indigènes. Ils s'amusent à tout bout de champ, et c'est ça. La fameuse paresse des îles. C'est le temps, le soleil indolent qui vous donne envie de rêver de dormir. Heureusement qu'on n'est pas revenu à les civiliser. Cliché aussi, car je suis dans la moyenne de la moyenne. Je vis dans un appartement miteux dans les faubourgs de la grande capitale. Il n'est pas utile de le décrire. Il suffit de savoir qu'il répand tous les relents de la médiocrité. Je ne suis ni riche, ni pauvre, ni belle, ni laide, ni intelligente, ni bête. Je ne suis rien. Mais ça, il faut éviter de le dire. On vit à l'ère du positif, il faut positiver. Le monde va mal, on dispose d'assez de bombes pour nous renvoyer aux enfers, mais il faut positiver. Je positive alors. Je ne suis rien, mais je positive. Cliché, car je suis une vieille femme, et une vieille femme est censée savoir se comporter en société. Il faut se tenir à ma chère. Elle ne doit pas se mettre, par exemple, à éructer qu'elle crève de peur à l'idée de la mort. Elle ne doit pas non plus dire qu'elle n'a nullement envie de jouer avec ses petits-enfants. De toute façon, je n'en ai pas. Elle doit se faire toute petite, recroquevillée comme un pot de chambre. Et pardonnez-moi cette impolitesse, on dira comme un vase à fleurs dont on a envie de se débarrasser, mais qu'on n'y arrive pas, parce qu'on a la nostalgie des vieilleries. Là-bas, dans mon île, on aime bien les vieux, surtout quand ils ont assez de terre pour nourrir plusieurs générations d'héritiers. Ici, puisque c'est la civilisation, on les confie à ce qu'on appelle pudiquement une maison de retraite. Étrange pudibonderie, quand on sait qu'on y passe ses journées dans des couches bourrées de pisse et de merde. Je suis un cliché, car évidemment, je déteste mon mari. Le confrère aurait sans doute étonné. Est-il possible d'aimer son conjoint après plus de 30 années de vie de couple? La question mérite d'être posée. Et dire que c'est à cause de cet imbécile que j'ai abandonné la merveilleuse île exotique et mes parents pour venir habiter ici. Mais à l'époque, pour être tout à fait franche, j'y croyais. Aller là-bas, au pays de la culture, se réinventer, devenir autre. Et j'y ai cru à son baratin et à son discours. J'ai écrit avec la ferveur du nouveau converti, avant inévitablement de perdre la foi et de me réconcilier avec la médiocrité infinie. Et là encore, je suis poli, de mon cher, très cher mari. Il ne faut jamais sous-estimer la ferveur des croyants qui se convertissent à l'athéisme. Donc, end of the extract. So this is from the book, like I said, Journal d'une vieille folle. Thank you. Well, I hope it's published, it's available online. I hope you can read it. But it was fun having it perform theater. So the lady who played the vieille folle, Vinesha, did, I think, a great performance. Right? So I'll go on now. But at the heart of the writing process, perpetual doubts arise. I write in a foreign language. Am I capable of a transcendence I dream of? Why create if we do not aim for the absolute? What is the value of all these written words? Are they merely the expression of my own impotence? I feel the paradoxical need to create and to free myself from writing. Hence the accidental discovery of photography. So a photographer friend, Frédéric Melotte, had photographed me. It was about 7 or 8 years ago, and I had loved his work. And one day, believe me, it's not a joke, I was swimming in the sea with my wife and children, and I had a vision, that of a black and white portrait of the well-known Mauritian writer who is called Barlen Payamutu. He has this striking writer's face, you know, this girl l'écrivain. And I understood then that I should take photos. And imagine that is the same Barlen Payamutu, who is also a publisher, who published, well, it's here, who published my book. It's a Bolive of portraits. Well, it will be on sale after that. So if you want to buy it, that would be great. Yeah, so it was Barlen who published the book about 2 years ago, right? So coincidence or destiny, I'll leave it to you to decide. So I bought a camera and started taking photos, mainly portraits. Portrait photography fascinates me for several reasons. First, they are very beautiful encounters. The shoot is generally preceded by conversation. So I have been able to talk with a lot of people. These are often rich and profound conversations that have taught me a lot and brought me a lot. Right? So during the past few years,
I must have done, I don't know, 300 portraits maybe. So it's like I've met so many people. I mean, usually come to my home, like I live in a place called Bobassa. Well, we came, but we did do the photo. We spent 2 hours talking. But it's been really nice meeting people from all walks of life, sharing, discussing, learning. Well, I try to listen and not speak about myself. So I've learned a lot, you know, and it's really fascinating in many ways, right? And I think also portrait photography is a process of discovering the other. We do not photograph a static object, but a being who gradually reveals itself, unveils who he is. I do not claim to photograph the soul of the other, but I sometimes believe I can catch a glimpse of it. So I think my fascination is really with this connection with people. And sometimes, I think we all wear masks, right? But during the processus photographic, you go beyond this mask and you unveil something which is really deep in the person. So yesterday I did a portrait of a friend, so she came to Beirut. And I think in the process of clicking, it's like almost I'm trying to capture the soul of the person. And right, and the most fascinating thing, and this is for this reason that I published the book, well, maybe you can take a look at the book later, is that in all these gazes, we find a kind of lost gaze. It's like people are in search of something indicible, unspeakable. For some people might think this is the gaze of a child. Some might think people are assoiffés, they have a thirst or something. As for me, I'm convinced that that's my own theory. It's like there's a kind of nostalgia for the divine, for a kind of lost paradise. You know, it's really striking when you do all these portraits. I mean, obviously people are different, right? We all have different stories, different personalities, and so on. But I think at the end of the day, I feel deep, deep, deep connection between all these people, as if we are all seeking the same thing. So I think there's a kind of existential dimension, you know, to portrait work. What does the gaze mean? What does like, ce regard mean? We have different interpretations, but for me, it's clear that there's a feeling of loss, there's a quest, we are seeking something desperately, I think. So we are lost in this world in search of what we were and what we will be. And I also think there's a deep connection between poetry and photography. La poésie, la quête de la substance, la quête de sa substance, et la photographie, la quête de la substance de l'autre. Poetry is the quest for one's own essence, and photography is the quest for the essence of others. So lately, well, it's pretty relaxed here in Beirut, so I'm having a really great time. So I have time to write poetry. And I was trying to write some stuff this morning, and I think when I'm trying to write poetry is really connecting with, go really like deep down in my soul and be true to myself and try to, y a pas de sens, there's no censorship when you write poetry. So it's like being true to my essence. I don't know if this means something, but when I'm writing a poem, it's always about going like really deep into myself and extract what's there, right? So Beirut feels like a very philosophical place, you know, it's very peaceful and so on, but there's all issue of memory. So it's great to write, but every time I'm writing, it's like I'm being to be like really true. I mean, try through language to express the deepest like corners or depths of who I am. And photography is the same process, but it's here you're trying to capture the essence of another being. So now I'm going to show you some photos. So for example, so this is what I like about portrait work. So for example, this photo was taken this is a homeless person. So in 2018, I was in the US. I was there for the International Writing Program, which is a little residence at the University of Iowa, which was really great. So I did the portraits of all the writers there, about 30 writers, and we traveled through the US. So we went to New Orleans. So this is a homeless person, right? And this is, I mean, so obviously when you do the portrait, I mean, I have to ask for the permission, obviously, of the person and so on. But when you do the portrait of a homeless person, you don't have this connection. You don't have time. You may speak for like a few minutes, but it's like not someone coming to my place. We'll spend one hour talking. But I've done the portraits of many homeless people, and one thing that is really striking is that people are
instantly authentic. They don't hide anything. It's like, when you take the photo, it takes time, some people, like, immediately, like, are really raw people. You see who they are immediately. But for example, here you see so much humanity and who this person is, I think, straight away. Right? Maybe if we could look at the second one, maybe?
The second one?
Yeah. So actually there's some space beneath, but because of the PowerPoint, you can't see it. Yeah. So this portrait is interesting as well, I think. So again, when I was in Iowa, this is a Romanian writer called Dan Koman. He's very charismatic. And I mean, light conditions were not good. It was really dark and so on. But I like this. It's like, again, the connection we've done. And this kind of summarizes, who he is. This is the portrait. Maybe I'll show two more. Yeah.
Which one?
Yeah, maybe this one.
This one?
Yeah. So this is a writer from, again, I met her in Iowa City. She's a writer from Dubai called Iman Al-Yusuf. And again, I find it hard, like, really to talk about the photos, what they mean, but I hope you can see the connection, the eyes, and so on, and this kind of restlessness, which I think is really fascinating. Maybe a last one. Yeah, this one maybe, number 9. Yeah. So again, there's some space behind her, underneath her face. You won't see it here. So this is a friend called Vinesha Bisundoyal. So she played the character of the Vieille Folle. I read an extract earlier. So this was in 2018. So I said, Vinesha, let's do a portrait shoot, right? And we met, and then for some reason she started crying, and you can see it here. So this is something really weird, because often when I do portraits, you have people who are like, they're on the verge of crying. I don't know why. It's really strange. And this is really powerful. There's another photo, but it's not on the PowerPoint. I did a portrait of, there's a Mauritian writer called Devi Rasomi. He's very well known. Well, he died last year. And the thing that really was, not great, but is that they used my photo of him in the funerals. And I thought, that's it, basically, I can die now. So in a way, I was telling this to this friend yesterday when I'm taking it. Well, I don't claim to be a professional photographer, far from it, right? There's still many things that I have to learn about light and lighting, light and so on, right? But I think actually my dream is really to do like the iconic portrait of a person. You can do many beautiful portraits, but I want to do this one portrait, what you can show to you, which is pretty ambitious in a way, I guess. But I would like to do this one portrait of this person, that, let's say, when he can show to his grandkid in, 50 years. That was when I was like 20, 30, 40 years old. I think that's the ambition, really. You can get like really good color portraits and so on. Should maybe the last one, the one of my wife. Yeah, it's on the desktop. Yeah. Yeah, so this is my wife. So her name is, now she has white hair. She stopped coloring her hair. So I did this portrait. So this one, it's really hard. This is a bit funny, I guess, because from time to time she asked me to take her portrait. And during the shoot, she will tell me, did you wash the dishes, or did you do like this and that, which drives me completely crazy. She's pretty obsessed with like decorating the house. So you tell me, did you do this and this and this and that? And then I'll show her 100 photos. She will hate every single photo. She won't like a single one. But then she will end up sharing it online without writing that I'm the photographer. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so I would like to finish by showing 2 more photos. I also recently started street photography, which is a different art from portrait photography, more difficult because it requires huge effort to find worthwhile photos. So the first photo was taken in, it's the second one, yeah, in New York last year. So I think what I really like about a street, I walk 100 kilometers to get like one photo, which I feel is really nice. So you have to walk a lot. But again, what I like about photography, and it's one of the reasons I prefer photography to writing, because it's like the feeling, I mean, I feel like blissful when I do some photos. I don't know, maybe it might not be a good photo, it might be crap actually, but I feel happy about it. And I've never really felt so happy about writing. I've never felt that it's good enough, right? So this, if you go to New York, there's a ferry which goes from New York to Staten Island. So I was on this ferry. And I saw this guy, he was there on the boat, and in the back you see La Statue de la Liberté. And I thought I had to get this photo because this is, to me, like the paradox of American society, you know, like oppression, slavery, and this dream of freedom, which is actually, I mean, now we realize more and more, just an illusion, I think, to a large extent. So I think what's really interesting about street photography is like looking for these paradox, you know, trying to capture the kind of duality that you have in society. And through a photo you can say, well, I don't know if people understand what I'm trying to say here, but I think, well, for me this captures something about maybe American society, about how this society works, history, and so on. I'll show you another photo, which is important to me. So I'm Muslim, right? So I went to Mecca last year, November 2023, for the small pilgrimage, which is called the Umrah. Well, it should be known that there are two pilgrimages. There's the Hajj, the major pilgrimage. So you have to apply, well, actually, I'm going with my wife next year. So you have to wait like 6, 7 years before being able to go. But Umrah, you can go anytime. So when I was in Mecca, I went to the top of, there's a famous mountain there called the Jabal el-Nur. It's where the Hira cave is located, where Prophet Muhammad, well, peace be upon him, received revelation. For this, a very interesting place, very poetic, right, and so on. So you have to climb. It takes 1 hour to get there. It's pretty hard, but it was worth it. So the Prophet used to go to this cave to meditate, a place obviously very special for believers. And coming out of the cave, I came across these two men who were praying. So the Prophet saw the Kaaba, which is the black rock, from the Jabal al-Nur. But what's really fascinating now is that you see the clock tower. So the clock tower is a shopping mall, actually, is a hotel. And I thought this is, I mean, when I saw these people praying and I saw the clock tower at the back, I said, this is mind-blowing. I mean, you can't make up these things, right? In the center, the heart of the spiritual life of Islam, right? You have a shopping mall next to the Kaaba. And from the Jabal al-Nur, where the Prophet received the revelation, you see a shopping mall these days. And you have these people praying, and you see the clock tower here. And I said, this is it. This is the photo I've been dreaming of. And I was really, really, really happy. So I think in Saudi Arabia, well, I went there for spiritual reasons, but I brought phone as well, take some photos. Was showing these like kind of paradox, you know, it being like this very spiritual place. For instance, around the Kaaba, but it's called the Haram Sharif, the most sacred place in Islam, I think, we've destroyed all the historical monuments to be like shopping malls, which is really weird in a way, right? You have spirituality and capitalism at the same time, right? So two things struck me when I did this. It's a moment of grace, of reverence, this transcendence I desperately seek for. And even most realizing that if the Prophet, peace be upon him, were living now, he would not have seen the Kaaba, but the shopping center, the clock tower. He would not have seen the heart of faith, but the God of money. We cannot make up such paradoxes. Which brings me back to the question of death. I think that creating is a way of finding an answer to the enigma of death. We are inhabited by an inexhaustible nostalgia for elsewhere. And there are, I think, multiple answers to this enigma. Some choose the worst, and we see all too well the consequences of the worship of money, the rise of fascism, nationalism, the destruction and annihilation of others, the dehumanization of others. We can make a different choice. Mine is to humanize myself, or at least I try. This humanization can take place in a secular space, art as transcendence, but also in the space of faith, art not as rebellion, but as an affirmation of the divine. Recently, with the friends of the Academy of Advanced African Studies, we're talking about decolonization. I think that this decolonization, which is more relevant than ever, contains many layers, but it revolves first about the decolonization of oneself. It is by liberating oneself first that we will achieve political liberation. It is perhaps by decentering oneself, by mastering what is called in the Islamic tradition the nafs, the ego, that we manage to be truly to humanize ourselves. We must humanize ourselves, go beyond the fictitious hierarchies, whatever they may be, of the need to dominate others. We must humanize ourselves because the future of humanity depends on it. The contrary choice means that, there are existential risks now to the human species. I think that man might disappear. And I will conclude, if you allow me, with une pensée. I walk every day through the streets of Beirut, more than 10 kilometers on average. I walk a lot, actually. It's a magnificent place where one can feel the presence of memory, a vivid and tormented memory. But what to do with this memory? Memory can serve to humanize us and others, or it can be the accomplice of the object dehumanization of the other. Have faith in this memory that invites us to the reign in the kingdom of light, and not in this memory that eviscerates the blood in the flesh of the wretched of the earth. At some point, if you're not careful and not courageous, we'll all become, like Fanon said, the wretched of the earth, les damnés de la terre. Thank you.
Bon, merci beaucoup, Umar. Avec ces derniers mots sur Bayreuth, parfois je me demande, est-ce que je vis vraiment dans la même ville que toi? Mais c'est très bien de changer de personne. Sorry, bravo. Okay, sorry. Let's switch back to English. I'm very sorry. Okay. You should have given me a sign. So thank you very much. Sometimes I'm asking myself, am I really listening to you if I'm living in the same town? But when you talk about the poetic and the philosophy, it's all there, but I guess running around every day, you might forget about this. Anyway, maybe just to open the discussion, let me come back to one point that was very striking in your presentation, is about when you talk about the street photography, you put the accent very much, the focus on the paradox. Well, when you talk about the portraits, it's not about the paradox, but trying to bring forth the essence or the soul of the person. So it would be nice if you could say a little bit more about that, because it's, at least listening to you, it seems like two completely different approaches. While maybe then the paradox could also be in, as you said, many people, when you talk with them and then you take their photos, they try first to hide something before the real person comes out. So maybe there's also the paradox. So maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on that.
Yeah, I think I have questions. There are many questions, but je me pose beaucoup de questions, and the difference, I guess, between portrait and street is that, like I said earlier, I think portrait to me is really connecting with someone. So it's a really fun process because you meet someone, you spend 1 hour talking. Well, actually, I try to listen. I don't talk too much about myself. So I learn a lot about the person. And while taking the photos, there's this moment of bliss, of grâce, when I see, well, the photo might not be good, because the light might not be good over there. It's far from perfect, but I can see something. And when I'm looking at processing the photos, and I use Lightroom, I feel really happy. And what does it mean? I don't know, but I can see this connection with. And I think, actually I have a theories that, I think photography is about technique, right? But I think the photos that I get, I get these photos because I have a connection with the person. If you were a different photographer, you would get something else. So it's il y a une rencontre des sensibilités, I guess. So when I meet the person, we connect, right? And I think there's a kind of alchemy between the photographer and the model, right? So it would be different with a different person because he has a different personality. So street photography, I think it's quite different, right? So first when I went to Mecca, which is an important trip to me, well, like I said, I went there for these spiritual reasons. Obviously, it was a pilgrimage. But I still had questions. And one of the questions is this paradox of modernity and religion. And I thought I want to get photo. Well, there's another photo. It's not on the PowerPoint, for instance. I was near the Kaaba, and you see there's a lady with a phone. And at the back, well, it's a kind of random shot, right? I just got it. So you see a phone, a person holding the phone, and at the back you have the carbon. So all these paradoxes, I think, are really like fascinating, right? So, well, it's not easy to do street in Beirut because there's not much happening. It's really peaceful. You can take photos of trees and a lake and a bird maybe. But yeah, I think. So I think the way, I mean, street and portrait are similar in the way that I'm trying to find answers to like questions, maybe. Yeah.
Maybe I forgot, as usual, I completely forgot to say as well that Umar came to, as a cluster of excellence, Africa Multiple chroniclist. So he's here for 3 weeks and will write about his impressions and also take photos. So please follow also then the site of Africa Multiple, because there at the end you will find also the poems that were inspired by poetic and philosophical Bayreuth, where nothing happens in the streets. Okay. Anyway, I think maybe we can already open up for if there are questions or comments, thoughts from the public. I think you have to come to speak into the. That was I thought you were saying.
Yeah, but I can speak without.
No, it's because it's also online, so otherwise people cannot hear what you're saying. Right.
Hi, I'm Khadija from Morocco, a student from Professor Prantler. I'm just curious about the photo of Ananda Devi.
Yeah.
Can you explain how did you take this photo?
Right.
And
So I've known Ananda for quite some time. Actually, she wrote the foreword to my first poetry book, which was called La Parole Testament. She's a very shy person, but I find her extremely intimidating. So she was in Mauritius, I think, a few years ago. So I wrote to her and I told her I wanted to do her portrait. So I went to her. I thought she was living in the north of the island then. So we had a chat, and then I did the portrait, and yeah, it was nice. And well, I mean, she uses it in her book's cover and so on, which is nice. Yeah. But you know, Ananda is a fascinating person because she's this very calm and peaceful person, and yet her books are very like tormented, you know. And she's such an amazingly talented, right? I'm really impressed by her work, right? So I was like kind of a bit intimidated by her, but it went well. I think we got some nice photos. Yeah.
thank you so much.
Yeah, but then you would have to come here. I'm sorry. Maybe. Voilà. Mais bon, le cas n'est pas très très long. Yes.
In English or in French?
I think it has to be in English.
Today it's in English.
Okay. So thank you very much for your presentation. It remembered me some really good times when I was at school reading also Baudelaire and trying to write poems to girlfriends and so on. So it was a good time. But I haven't become a poet like you.
It's not too late.
Maybe it's too late. But my question is your defining of decolonization. This is quite interesting for me. And I have the question to know whether your background as Muslim has played a role in this definition, because if you take the Muslim tradition, you have this jihad, the great jihad, the minor jihad, the major jihad, and the major one is to do a lot of violence, education on oneself before asking for others some change. Do your background have played a role in this definition, or where does it come from? Thank you. This is the question. It was very interesting.
Thank you. So I'm Muslim, and I grew up in a Muslim family. But I think I would say that to a large extent, I would consider myself to have been. I mean, when you live in the South, whether you want it or not, you are colonized, because colonization, I feel, was a cultural genocide. There's so much erasure of your own culture, and there's a hegemonic culture, which is Western culture, which you feel is like is the dominant culture. If we talk about the nation, capitalism, patriarchy, and so all these, like, I mean, they're relevant and true to a certain extent, but they come from a certain history. And I think lately, I've been going through some like remise en question by reading and so on. So, so I came across a thinker, which I think is really important, called Wael Halak. He's a professor at Columbia. He's an expert in Islamic law, and he wrote a book called The Impossible State. And, well, you have to read it. I mean, I've been trying to convince many people to read, but the single person who has read it so far is my son. No one has read it. It's fairly heavy. But I think, I mean, you can check it online. But I think what I've learned reading Halak is that, well, I have this debate with my son often. He's studying anthropology in London, second year. So he defines himself as an anarchist. So we often have this debate. I'm telling him, so you define yourself as an anarchist, but yet you're within the paradigm of Western thought, whether it's Marxism and so on, right? So how do you decolonize really? And I think decolonizing means thinking outside, not against the West, but outside of the West through a rich history, through a different paradigm. And I think this is one of the things that Halak has taught me, actually. It's like we're talking about decolonization, and yet we people from the South are very, like, on depend on, like, Western thought. We are Western thinkers, right? And what about a completely different paradigm with a different understanding of what life is, of what politics is, and so on? And I think Halak helped me in a way to try to go. It's very hard, actually. Right? I'll just give you an example. I wrote an article about this, like Camus. Well, you can read it online. The article is called Reading Camus at 18 and I think at 52. I've always been fascinated by Camus because I love French language and he writes so really well. And I felt that Camus, when I read La Peste and so on, was irrelevant to my life. But when I read Camus now, I don't think it's relevant anymore. I mean, I love the words, the way he writes and so on. If you read Le Mythe de Sisyphe, for example, it's such a Western-oriented text, right? He lived in Algeria, but there's not a single word about a single, like, Muslim thinker or Arab thinker. So it's very, very Westernized, and in a way it connects to my life, but not so much now because I'm looking for different answers. And the geopolitical situation now shows that maybe, I'm not saying it's not against the West, right? It's trying to go beyond. And so I think it's hard to escape this process of colonization, and decolonization requires effort, I think intellectual effort. And I think it's harder for intellectuals because you have this well of work. I mean, if I talk to someone who's not so much into books, but he doesn't care about reading Camus or Kant or whatever, right? He just has his faith. It's something which is really simple and straightforward. I guess for people who read, who have in démarche intellectuelle, maybe it's harder. So I think, yeah, but I have a complex relationship with faith as well. So it's not, I don't have all the answers, actually. But I guess I'm seeking, and I think for me, this idea of decolonization is important. You talk about the jihad, but it's the jihad of the self, trying to be a better person. Well, I talk about this in the speak. I talked about this earlier. Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing your work. It's a wonderful series of photographs. My question to you is about your craft and your process. For instance, do you use different cameras if you are with a sitter, or if you're going out on the street? Do you change lenses? So what is your process? And also, if you are sitting with a sitter, is it like a spontaneous process? What do you do to make them pose a certain way? And with the street photography, do you purposely foreground something, blur something? So if you could just tell us a bit about your process.
Right. Okay. So I use a camera, which is the Nikon D7000. I have two lenses, one for portrait and one for street. And I process the photos on Adobe Lightroom, right? So the process for the portrait is usually, well, I do like street, like homeless, obviously. You won't spend much time speaking to the person. So there are people I know, they are friends, so I'll get in touch with them, like on Facebook, and say, I would love to do your portrait. So usually they come to my place. And one thing that is really interesting, if you ask people questions, they end up telling you their whole life within like 30 minutes. So if you spend time listening to people have many things to say, right? They will tell you about the breakups, love life, depression, suicide, everything. Right? It's really amazing how, you met, like you know someone online, you said hi, and then you meet the person, and then, I mean, after 1 hour, you know, basically, I mean, not everything, but a lot. Then I start taking so I don't ask the person to pose, right? I just take the photo, and so I think since we had this connection, it makes it easier. I want the person to feel like really comfortable, and to feel like relaxed, and then there's an alchemy, so something happens. I don't know why or how it works really, but you see something. Sometimes people smile, or they might cry almost. So that's basically the process. Then I process the photos on Lightroom. I'll send it to the person, and usually I share 1 or 2 online. We'll select 1 or 2 photos. But actually, I did the portrait of the father of a friend. That's the only time when I felt the person had no soul. I couldn't see anything. It's like I did a portrait, and nothing is happening. It's like the person was completely like void. There's a void in the person. But otherwise, you feel it's like humanity, right? Street. Well, I don't blur, I just walk, and I find street really hard because, you know, it's like, actually, I came across the writings of an American photographer and mystic called Thomas Merton. He talked about this idea of mystical photography, I think something like that. But actually, you can photograph everything because if you believe in God, this means everything is special, right? Even like, I don't know, this food, everything like is in création, in grâce. It's bliss in a way. But I haven't got to this point yet when I can photograph, I don't know, a pair of glasses or something like that. So it's hard because you're looking for something special in reality. But I think reality itself is always special. But I'm looking for something that's really striking. And so when I went to Mecca, before going, I thought I want to show this paradox of modernity and religion, right? Because Saudi Arabia is kind of this neo-colonized country, right? So I wanted to show this, right? This kind of paradox. So I had an idea in my mind. You know, I will look for this, right? And then you come across something which goes beyond what you were looking. I said I would try to do this, but when you come across something like this, sort of it goes beyond what I thought was possible. It's like this paradox, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. My question is about the poetry and your short story. I remarked that in your poetry, the synthesis is extremely short. And in your short story is too long. The sentences are too long. Is it your choice or is in conscious processes of writing? Is it a choice? As a writer, or is in conscious processes choice?
Yeah, actually, I don't know what I'm doing. Yeah, well, the poem "Someone" I wrote it like fairly quickly, so it's like it's rooted in feelings, right? So I don't think it's really conscious. I mean, for me, this poem sounds like it's really connected to Sufism, you know, but it's not a Sufi poem because in Sufism you have all this idea of, well, I don't drink, by the way, they call it wine and so on, but you have this whole idea in like Sufi poetry of wine, you know, it's like of finding God, you know, and so on. So I think like writing Le Journal, it was a fun process of creating this character. So I'm not really thinking about, it's just like I enjoy writing, creating the character. So I don't think it's really conscious. Well, you try, obviously when it's a novel, you try to construct the story and the narrative and so on, right? But I don't think it's really conscious decision.
Another question there? No? Someone coming on.
Thank you. It's really fascinating. I have a question again related to the process. So you said people talk about their life, they talk about suicide, love, whatever. So, and I mean, I can imagine this kind of alchemy of. I remember there's a the name just escapes me. That there's a Israeli filmmaker who was describing the same thing about how it takes time and then actually to make a kind of a portrait of people. My question is, do you trigger the conversation by, for instance, if you decide now you want to make a portrait of Ute and you ask her a question like, what is the crucial moment? Like you were talking about your father's death at the age of 3, so what is yours? Is that the kind of thing? And then she keeps on talking and she tells you more than she actually wants to, and you get into this kind of alchemy, and then you tell her, sit a bit like this or look a bit like that, or is it then like the natural process? Sorry, I'm just trying to make this somehow visible. Yeah.
I think it's just a normal conversation, like you would, I'm just meeting someone, just have a conversation. We talk about different things. Often I ask the person, what's your relationship to death, for instance? But I think it's really a normal conversation, actually. I don't have like written questions. I say, I'm going to ask you this and this and that. But actually I tend to meet people who have an artistic background, who are fairly similar to me, so we really connect in a way. But I find people really interesting. Like lately I met a scientist who has a PhD in physics. We had a conversation about religion, spirituality. So you meet all kinds of, and the conversation is really, really, really interesting. So I try to ask questions. But I think the key is listening to people. I realize people have many things to say, but they don't have the opportunity to speak. And now you're meeting someone who's listening to you for 1 hour, and they will say many things, yeah.
And if I just add, and then you make her, so if we take the example of Ute again, so you do, or myself, sorry, you're just sitting you're having a conversation, right? So then you tell her, shut up, I'm going to take a photo now?
No, see, now it's, yeah. I see, now let's do it. It takes like 10, 15 minutes. I say, let's do the portrait now. And so we do it. Yeah.
The mic is really far away. There are more questions. More questions, but I was just wondering, because when you're talking about the conversations, actually, then there's a lot of story, but you don't write down any stories.
I don't. But I was telling. Sorry, I forgot your name. I have been working on another project for the past few years, which is called like Muslim Faces Breaking the Stereotype. Well, it's online. It's on Facebook. So here we have, the whole idea is like, there's so many stereotypes of Muslims now, the issue of Islamophobia and so on. So I thought I would meet people and take their photos, and then we write a text. The whole idea is show that, Muslims are just like other people. So on this like Facebook page, you have the photos along with the text where the person tells us a bit about his life. Yeah. But usually I don't feel, la photo suffit. I don't feel there's anything good write about the photo. It's just that it's enough, I think. Yeah.
Hi, I just want to know if there is any key link between your novels, poetry, and your photography, or it's just completely independent. It must be somehow like a link.
Yeah. I think one of the reasons I started photography is to escape from language, right? Because I write in French, which is not my native. And one of the issues, we're talking about decolonization, starting to write in Creole. So I've started writing in Creole, right? So in a way, it's like an escape from the intellect and the mind and language. So it's kind of writing with light in a way. And it's like, and I think I have a different relation with words because it's like I really, je vénère move. So it's like when I read like authors, but like Ananda, for instance, it's pretty depressing reading. I told her actually, I'll never be able to write like you. So it's pretty depressing in a way. Well, I'll try. I'll keep trying to write, but it feels like that you cannot never get there really. While photography, it was possible to get. I'm not saying these are good photos. I'm saying I'm happy with it, I'm not really happy with my writing always. But I felt happy with this photo. I felt I was getting something that I want, that I like, but I feel I can be happy about. Yeah. And like I said, the connection I think is like poetry. Like poetry is about me, and photography is about others. Yeah.
Yeah, hello. So it's not really a question, but I just noticed that in most of your portraits, there's half of the photo that is left empty. Yeah. So is it aesthetic choice, or is it?
I mean,
okay.
again, it's not really when I'm taking the photo. That's how it feels. I want to leave this space, right? I mean, that's how it. I mean, again, it's not really like I've thought about it, but that's how I see it. Well, there's a kind of rule of third and so on. Right? And I try to cut like the forehead as well. Yeah. But again, like I said, you know, I'm not a professional photographer. It's just some like self-taught. It's just like how I connect to it. It's, the whole idea is how close can you get, because I want to get like really, I mean, you can't get too close because you want to see only the eyes of the person. The whole is how close can you get to the person, or how close can you get to the soul of the person. So I really am trying to extract the soul, which is, I mean, you can't get like 5 centimeters away from the person and taking the photo. So again, it's like I'm aiming really to get like really, really close to the person. I don't know why I like this actually. It's a bit crazy. I have no idea why I connect with this whole idea of taking photos and portrait and so on. Yeah.
If I may add another comment, it's about street photo in New York. So I think this photo for me is like a palimpsest, because we can kind of link it to many other images that we've seen maybe in cinema, but also in text. I don't know why when I saw this picture, it reminded me of this chapter in Le Voyage au bout de la nuit de Céline, this chapter about the US and the Statue of Liberty, like an erection, and it linked also with what you said about spirituality and capitalism. So it was like the sign of something that is kind of, je sais pas comment dire, transpercer le ciel. That was. Yeah, exactly. But it was like so I don't know. It was just a thought I wanted to share.
Yeah, I think that was the idea, right, of showing this paradox, you know. And when I saw this guy, I said, "This is it. I have to get this right, because this is what I'm looking for." Yeah.
So what I wanted to ask is that is there a connection, like link between the stories behind the portraits and the portraits that we see, such as this woman? Because she's like, I can see a woman who is thinking like something from the past, or like, I don't know, like thinking so deep. And the second question will be that, do you remember the conversations behind the pictures, behind the portraits?
Sorry, I didn't understand the first question. Could you?
Like the first question is that, is there a link between the emotions of people you are taking picture when you're talking to them? Because like in the background, you're talking to them about something, like a conversation is there. Can we see the conversation in the eyes of the person? Right. Or have you ever said like, okay, there's a different emotion, like, but the story behind this picture was different?
Yeah, I think there's a link, because, like I said, you meet the person, and I mean, often, like, recently I did the portrait of his friend. I mean, I did several portraits before coming to Beirut, and we spend like and then we have to end up the conversation because there are too many things to say. So it's like we really connect with people. But then for some reason the person has to go, have something to do. So and I could have spoken like 3-4 hours, because and I think this is what it's linked to the emotion connecting me to the person, but gives it, like I say, if someone else did the photo, you would get something different. I think there's a connection. So it's about the emotion. Like I say, it's an alchemy, I think. When you meet someone, there's always an alchemy. You meet some people, I mean, you won't connect with some people, right? You want to run away because you're toxic, right? Yeah. Or you might meet someone and spend 5 hours talking to this person. You feel like you've known him forever while you've met him just for the first time. Actually, I won't say I remember every single thing people have said, but I remember more or less what people said and the conversations we had, or like really remember like the most important things they've said. So the conversations are really, really interesting, and it's here somewhere. You know, when I look at the photo, like the one Anand, I remember we had a conversation. Yeah, so I kind of remember what they said. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you so much for sharing your work with us today. So I was quite struck when you said that poetry for you was mostly an exploration of yourself. And I was struck because in the poem you shared, Journal d'un Vieux Faux, and also another poem I think I read, where I think there's a story of a woman who migrates, and I read these poems as like character studies, almost like studies of people that maybe you meet in life, and you're sort of speculating what emotions or thoughts they might have. And so I without being too intrusive, I guess, like, are these poems, if you say was about yourself, is there a way in which you maybe imagine yourself in other bodies or in other lives that also help you figure out who you are, and that becomes part of your poems?
Yeah. Well, I think you have like all these like existential questions and so on, and I think through poetry and writing you're trying to find answers. But lately I've been very much involved in the world of theater. So and I think in a way, so when I write a poem, it's really about this finding this essence. But maybe like writing plays or even the Journal d'un Vieux Faux, it's like you're writing poetry through novels, or it's always about, I mean, for me it's always about poetry. It's about finding this rhythm, connecting with oneself and so on. But in the world of theater, so I've been working, I'm working on a project right now. It's a play, I mean, I'm starting like, I was in La Mise en Scène, stage directing the play soon, which is something new for me. So for instance, I created a character. It's a monologue. It's called Le Beau Gosse de la République, the handsome man of the Republic. So it's kind of this monologue of a crazy politician, right, based a bit on Donald Trump. So he lock up a journalist in a cage, right, and he speaks for 1 hour, right. So he's completely crazy. And my wife told me she won't attend the play because there's a lot of swearing in it, and so on. But I think what's really, I mean, why did I create this character? Because I mean, like questions about the issue of power. Why do people love power, right? The whole issue of, I mean, maybe deep in us, we have this need for power in a way, right? So I think through all these characters, you can like ask all these questions, and I don't think there are easy answers. So it's really about exploring your own self and sharing it with others. And sometimes, like, for instance, this character of VFL, what was really interesting is that I met women who told me that they could like relate to the character. Well, obviously I'm not a woman, right? But I think there's a kind of relationship that builds with people who read the book or watch the play. So I think it's really interesting. But yeah, I think it's truly at the end of the day, it's about your own self and the questions you have, your own doubts, your own quests in life, yeah, through poetry and through like stories and so on.
Thank you so much. We have this class with you next Wednesday on creating writing.
Yeah.
So I would like to know if writing is related to a technique or to inspiration creation, or both.
Right. Well, I think writing is about hard work, but you have to work really hard, but I don't work hard enough. I think you have to be extremely disciplined. So I guess I'm still learning how to write better. It's like how to improve your skills, how to express how to gain a better mastery of language. So for instance, if I write a poem, I'll try to read it like 5, 10, 20 times, like peaufiner, improve it, Well, I'm working on plays now, so I'm thinking a lot about this. Well, let's say that, I will just give an example. If I write a poem, I don't really think about the audience, right? It's really about me, I think. But now I'm writing I've written like 3 or 4 plays now. I mean, 3 were performed like the past year. So the play I'm working on, for example, so the structure is different because I have to think of the audience, right? So I try to write something that is well written, I hope. And at the same time, think about the structure because it's going to be performed. So I don't want it to be boring. I want to at the same time, make people create une discussion, donner aux gens envie de réfléchir. Right, so I think you have to work on structure and so on, right? But
So I think it's a process of learning, actually, how to write better, how to structure your text, and so on. But in many ways, also very much intuitive, right? It's related to your feelings. Yeah.
You will still come to the workshop? Okay, are there, I mean, it's getting a bit, not too late, but if there's maybe a last question, that would be the chance. Jelena? Otherwise, we go to get into transcendence.
So, could you tell us something about your relation to the island of Mauritius? And what do you think if you chose to represent, to portray Mauritius today? Would it be possible to portray the landscapes of Mauritius in black and white or in color? So
Right.
the paradoxes, because you showed us also a photo with paradoxes. I think it was a Statue of Liberty or also. So could you tell us something about it?
Right. So, well, I know everyone knows about Mauritius. Mauritius is an island located in the Indian Ocean. It's really small, right? If you go from the tip of the island from north to south in a car, it takes like 3 hours, which is really small. So I grew up there, and I mean, I've lived abroad for a few years, but I still live, and I think I'll live there until the end. Well, there are many things to be said in Mauritius, but I don't want to bore you. But I think Mauritius is a very paradoxical society. You know, I think there are two texts that you should read. There's one by B.S. Naipaul, who was written in the 70s, called The Overcrowded Barracoon, and there's one by Stiglitz, the Nobel Prize, written a few years ago. So in the Overcrowded Barracoon, the text was published, I think, in the 70s, and it was very critical of Mauritius. Mauritius was a poor country then. Many people were migrating, and, well, Naipaul was pretty cynical about Mauritius. Stiglitz wrote an article, his Nobel Prize in Economy, I think 3 years ago, where he said like some really amazing things about Mauritius being an example, a model. You have free healthcare, free education, and so on. So it's like a kind of mixed bag, because on the one hand, Mauritius was this really poor country in the 70s. Like, it's not a highly developed country, it's a fairly developed country. We've never had any coup d'etat, you know, it's democratic. And in the context of rise of fascism and nationalism, the whole world, Mauritius is quite still democratic, and most political parties, I would say, are like mainstream. So there are many good things, I think, about Mauritius as a model and example for the so-called third world. But on the other hand, there are many problems. It's like a colonial structured society with many economic inequalities. I mean, Mauritius now, there's a report which has been published recently by VDEM. It's an organization, I think, in Sweden. They say Mauritius is not a democracy anymore. It's called an autocratic democracy, I think. But I think it's a trend all over the world. But now people are a bit afraid to be criticized, government and politicians and so on. So Mauritius is really a mixed bag of the best, of some really good things in the south compared to many southern countries. And I think what I like about Mauritius is that, I mean, there's racism like everywhere else, but there's a kind of vivre ensemble in Mauritius, which works to a certain extent. I feel very much, I mean, I don't know if it'll be like this forever, but I feel like en paix in my relationship with people from different communities and so on. As for the photos, well, you know, the problem is that I don't take many photos of Mauritius. The reason being is that I feel trapped. When you live on an island, you don't travel. You escape, actually, because it's expensive to travel, right? It's not like if you live in Germany, you're bored, you can go to Munich or France. It's cheap, right? You can go to so many places, right? But when you live on an island, it's actually expensive to travel, right? If you want to go to South Africa or even come to Germany. So traveling is like really an escape. So I think my mind is always like, when am I next going to travel? So I try to travel like every 4 months so I can escape for 2 weeks, and then I go back to Mauritius. It's not, I don't care about the landscape and so on, but it's just my mind is like, I'm always thinking, you know, I need to go because it's like you feel crushed. You know, it's like you see the same thing all the time. So it's small. It's really small, yeah.
It's more about the people. I guess Mauritius is then more about the people, as you have a lot of pictures, the portraits of a lot of Mauritian artists. I guess maybe we should come to an end here now, so that people have also time to, I mean, approach you and chat in a more leisurely way afterwards. So thank you very much again, Umar, for sharing your thoughts and your practices, approaches in your work, in writing, and also in photography. So we will be waiting for more street photography from Mauritius and from islands maybe. And also the poems then on the website of Africa Multiple. So I would also like to thank Africa Multiple that they make it possible that we can invite always artists to Bayreuth and we can have nice conversations. I would also like to thank the team of Kulturhaus Neuneinhalb, which is always a great welcome here and makes things easy. So thank you very much. And also would like to thank Sabine Greiner for, she's doing always the nice posters. We will come back to the nice posters. So, and what we said in the beginning, I don't know if you want, maybe you want to say something again about your book before then we close for tonight, and then maybe before I forget it, next week on Thursday, the 23rd, right? So if you want to continue discussion, please come back to talk about theater, so his writing, but then together with, there's another artist with us in the room from Burkina Faso, also a theater person. Bonsoir, Monsieur Tiendrebeogo. So come back next Thursday, and a moderator will not be me, great, but Loden Gadi, who's sitting there also. So maybe you want to say a couple of words in the end about your book, and then thank you so much for being with us. And he's still here for 2 weeks, and as you heard, he's walking around. So le flaneur, you might meet him somewhere and have a coffee with him. So thanks again.
So first, I would like to thank UT, Professor Fendler, for inviting me again. It's been great. And University of Bayreuth and Sabine, very warm welcome. So I'm really happy to be here. And the team here had a great time. And thank you for coming. You know, I have a pretty hectic life at home. I'm just happy to be able to wake up late, to walk, take photos, meet people. It's wonderful. I mean, this is paradise, basically, for me. For the past, 10 days. So I published this book. So I say like Barland, the publisher, published this book 2 years ago. So it's like, the forward actually is by Ananda Devi. I wrote a text as well, so you have 140 portraits in it. Well, it's on sale, 20 euros, so if you feel like buying it, great, it's available there. So thank you so much for coming, it was great. You know, the artistic life is like, French say, it's really ingrat, it's hard because you keep writing and doing stuff. And it's pretty lonely at times, right? And it's really great to have the opportunity to share what I've been doing for these past few years, because you feel very much alone at times, because you feel like no one understands what you're doing, and you even wonder why you're doing this, because it's not, I don't earn income doing this, right? It's not, I'm a teacher in a high school, right? And then you have this moment of grâce, you know, when you have this support, and this is great, and thank you so much for this, Judy. It's wonderful.